Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's transfer tips video, I will be taking a look at some of the most popular players being bought and sold ahead of FPL Gameweek 8. Welcome back to another video on the channel. If you're new around here, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit like and importantly subscribe to the channel as we close in on 5,000 subscribers. Of course, only if you enjoyed the video. But for now, let's talk about João Pedro first up. A player that's been sold by over 200,000 managers ahead of Gameweek 8 already. That will undoubtedly get towards 400, 500,000 before the deadline, the most sold forward in FPL this game week. And he has gone on a bit of a barren spell. It's 4 game weeks now where he's only taken 2 shots on goal. The data has dropped off massively and he's down to only 0.24 XG per 90, which for any striker is pretty poor. That puts him below the likes of Dominic Calvert-Lewin for XG per 90. So it has been a worrying spell. He's owned by over 60% of the player base. So a lot of managers have value tied up in him. I can understand why people would be reluctant to get rid of him for that reason, but that's not stopped 200,000 managers from already pressing the button. What I would say is that there have been mitigating circumstances in the last 4 game weeks that have led to him dropping off a little bit in terms of form. Obviously, before that barren spell had picked up 5 returns in his opening 4 game weeks, and the data was looking pretty strong. But since then, Chelsea have had 2 red cards in those matches, so he's been a bit isolated up top. Chelsea obviously not creating as many chances for him, and he's also been played out of position as a forward since the Delap injury as well. Not only that, but Cole Palmer's not been in the side, so that creative spark has been lacking slightly somewhat. And João Pedro himself has been dealing with a slight knock that Maresca has publicly been talking about for 3 or 4 game weeks now, and yet playing him throughout that time in spite of any sort of nagging injury concerns. The good news is that he wasn't called up for Brazil for international duty, so he's had a good 2 weeks off, or will have done by the Gameweek 8 deadline. So I would imagine that if it's a slight injury doubt that's been plaguing him in the last couple of game weeks, that will probably no longer be an issue by the time we get to Nottingham Forest in Game Week 8. And obviously, at the moment, at time of recording, Ange is in charge. That looks like a really good fixture. Then it's Sunderland, Spurs and Wolves after that as well. So I would possibly just press pause on selling him for now. I'm on wildcard and he's in my wildcard draft right now. I would even argue that potentially he's quite a good buy ahead of Game Week 8. There are very slight doubts over Enzo Fernandez's fitness, which might not seem significant to João Pedro, but if for whatever reason Enzo did miss Game Week 8, I think João Pedro will be the next penalty taker and even arguably might take the next penalty even with Enzo on the pitch as well. So I think a fully fit João Pedro, playing in a side with a good set of fixtures over the next 4 game weeks, and with his Champions League suspension as well, which I haven't brought up so far, but he will be suspended between Game Week 8 and Game Week 9. So there's no real reason why he should get rotated out of the side against either Nottingham Forest or Sunderland, because he's just had a rest for 2 weeks during the international break. He'll have another rest in midweek before between Nottingham Forest and Sunderland. So I think he's a great buy, let alone a good hold right now. I would not be getting rid of him. Obviously, the data's dropped off a bit recently. I've explained the mitigating circumstances. I personally would not be getting rid. So moving across to one of the most popular players to be buying ahead of Game Week 8, that is Mohamed Kudus with over 250,000 transfers in. He's gotten 6 attacking returns in his opening 7 game weeks in the Spurs kit. So obviously, a very good start to the season. I can see why he's so popular. What I would say is that most of those attacking returns have been assists so far, 5 assists, only 1 goal. And historically, the data suggests that he does lean more towards the assist threat than the goal threat. He's also been playing quite wide for Spurs in the majority of matches. I think most recently he picked up a goal, his first goal in the Premier League against Leeds, in the Spurs kit anyway. And he was playing more centrally in that match. He was getting into more central areas. So promising signs there that maybe I might have to bite my tongue on my earlier prediction that he would be playing a little bit too wide to make him a good FPL asset. I think if he comes in more centrally and he does get more shots on goal in and around the 6-yard box, like he has been doing more recently, that does make him more appealing. He's still at a pretty decent price point as well, at under 7 million. And he has been absolutely crucial to everything good that Spurs have been doing. So early substitutions, rotation, those seem pretty unlikely for him unless there are any sort of fitness doubts over the foreseeable future. That doesn't look likely. So I don't think he's a bad player to be buying. And certainly if I had him already, I wouldn't be rushing to get rid of him. All I would be saying at this point in time is I don't know if it's the best time to be buying a Spurs asset if we look at the fixtures. The returns have been good. I expect him to tick along nicely. And if you've already got him, I wouldn't say he's a priority sell whatsoever. But up next, you've got Aston Villa, Everton, Chelsea, Man United. There are 3 home games in there, but then none of them are standout, really good fixtures. And at the price point, and considering he's not got the best goal threat up until Leeds, at least in the most recent game week, I would say that there might be better purchases at around this sort of price point. Again, not to say that he's a bad player to be buying. He's obviously overperformed on his underlying data quite significantly. So that's in a way positive, but also concerning when we're trying to predict future points returns. If we move across to the live screen, there are plenty of other picks around this sort of price point that I would probably be looking at first before Kudus. You've got Enzo Fernandez with a great run of fixtures now. There are slight injury doubts, but I think he'll be fit. Nottingham Forest, Sunderland, Spurs, Wolves, Burnley, and then Leeds in game week 14 as well. He might be on penalties. He's got better underlying data than Kudus, so I'd probably prioritise him. Ismail Assar as well. Fantastic underlying data, 0.61. That's over 3 times what Mohamed Kudus is putting up. He's also got 3 home games in the next 4. Probably about as good as Spurs in terms of the fixtures. Arsenal's in there. You'd probably not be too happy about that one. But long-term, some good fixtures in there. And very differential. Eze, if you've got a little bit more money, we'll come on to him later. On page 2, in terms of the transfers in, you've got players like Minter, who's got good fixtures. Rice as well, who is weirdly flagged, even though he played for England. But he's got great fixtures coming on set pieces. Not terrible underlying data. In fact, not a million miles off of what Kudus has been putting up. And he's good on DEFCON. And Ndai as well, who's on penalties. Obviously, Kudus doesn't have that benefit. And after Man City, not a bad run of fixtures either. So I don't think Kudus is a bad player to be buying. And I don't think anyone who owns him already should be looking at selling him ahead of Villa, who've been faulty. They've not been great. Everton as well. Not a bad defence, but you wouldn't be surprised to see an attacking return. It's not a terrible run. But as a purchase right now, I'm not sure if I'm facing up a run of those 4, followed by Arsenal, Newcastle in there. Fulham are a good defence historically. Liverpool in game week 17 as well. They haven't really got a standout, amazing game all the way through to game week 20, probably. So I just don't know if it's the right time to be buying. Again, I don't think he's a bad player to be holding on to. I like him. He's been performing really well. And if he's playing more centrally, he's probably a good player to be holding on to. And he might get better goal threat as the weeks progress. But I don't know if I prioritize him over some of the other options I just mentioned there as a purchase right now. Right then, so full disclosure, I've tried recording this particular section like 10 times and I just keep messing it up. So hopefully this is the one that sticks, because my thoughts on Bruno Fernandes are complicated to say the least. I'll try and make sense. It's been very frustrating owning him in FPL so far this season. Obviously, 3 penalties taken, 2 missed. That is way below his normal hit rate of about 88%. So I do feel a little bit unlucky, a little bit hard done by, and I think other owners do as well. But regardless, 2 attacking returns, 2 goals in the opening 7 game weeks isn't great value for money at 9 million. And he is now coming into a short run of not so great fixtures, starting off with Liverpool away, 3 away games in the next 4. It does soften a little bit after that. And the fixtures longer term actually don't look too bad. In fact, if you just take the Liverpool game out, it's not all that bad in the first place. I think even from game week 9, arguably Nottingham Forest's not a bad fixture. Spurs, you can see an attacking return. After that, like I said, the fixtures do become a bit better again. And the underlying attacking data isn't exactly bad either. 0.53 XG per 90 has been bolstered by the 3 penalties. And as unlucky as he is to have missed 2 of the 3 penalties, he's still getting 3 penalties in the opening 7 game weeks. And that itself is quite fortunate. You wouldn't expect Man United to hit something like 15 to 20 penalties this season. That's just not going to happen. So that will die off. It will regress a little bit. But as long as he keeps penalties, I still think he's a decent asset to own. I'm on wildcard. I don't currently have him in my draft because I do have a sneaky suspicion that because the fixtures in the short term aren't great, and because a lot of people are selling him anyway, it does expose me to quite a lot of risk if I was to hold on to him. So I think it's absolutely fine to get rid of Bruno Fernandes at this point in time. Like I said, fixture's not great. He's been a little bit unlucky, but also very frustrating to own. And the underlying attacking data, if you take away the penalties, has not looked that impressive whatsoever. And the projection over the next 5 game weeks, non-penalty anyway, is 0.45 XGI per 90. So if you are someone who thinks that there is even a chance that he loses penalties now or starts giving them away to people like Mbermo, Cunha, maybe Sesko, who have good penalty records, they're going to be in his ear, they're going to want to take the next one. If you think that he's selfless and gives it away for the good of the team, then I would say that Bruno Fernandes at 9 million is just not worth the money, at least right now. Maybe later on down the line, he still could be. He's still got good creative threat. He still gets the odd goal, and he does get DEFCON every now and then as well. So he's just never going to be a bad option, particularly if he does keep penalties. But I think this week in particular, when he's coming into a run of not great fixtures, plus the fact that a lot of people are selling him, and it does expose quite a lot of risk if you do hold on to him, because you're backing him to do better than the players that other managers are going and buying in what is not a great run of fixtures in the first place. I think he's probably a sell. I'm on wildcard, so it's an easier decision for me. If I had him and I had any other problems in my side and I was just using transfers, I don't think he's a desperate sell. But if it is to fund someone like a Bukayo Saka, or to get to Semenyo, for instance, as well, if you don't have him already, I think it does make sense to get rid of him for now, put a pin in it. And I do think he's a player that we'll come back to later on, maybe around game week 12, 13, especially if we know by then that he has kept penalties. But for now, there is at least some doubt, however slight, that he takes the next penalty, and the fixtures aren't great. So I would probably go with the crowd on this one. And as long as it's not ripping apart your team to do so, and you're not forgoing another more important transfer, I think it's okay to be getting rid of Bruno at this point. Okay, so moving on to the Arsenal attacking options ahead of game week 8. A lot of managers have already committed to Gyökeres, either be it on wildcard in game week 4, game week 6, a lot of wildcards used to get to Gyökeres as well, and in game week 7, a lot of people use free transfers to bring him in ahead of what was a good run for Arsenal, starting off with West Ham at home. If you're one of those managers, I just wouldn't be panicking about it. I know it's unfortunate he didn't take the last penalty, and I think it is fair to suggest or assume that Saka is the player that is going to stand up more often than not and take the penalties. I think it's his right of refusal. It's up to him, and he takes charge in those scenarios. But if between now and the time the next penalty is taken, Gyökeres hasn't scored a goal, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Saka just gifted him it to get him back up and running and get him off the mark again, because they do have a good team spirit. Saka is a fairly team-focused player, and whilst I think he is first in line, if it's for the benefit of Gyökeres, I wouldn't be surprised to see him take the next penalty. All of that being said, I think if I was picking fresh right now, Saka would just take the edge. His minutes are starting to look a little bit better. That was my first hesitation a couple of weeks ago. But now that we've kind of had it proven to us that he is fit enough to keep starting games, to get 90 minutes, and with the fixtures still looking pretty encouraging, and now when you also add in the fact that he probably is first choice penalty taker, I think all of that blends together to make a really good FPL asset. And also, we know Saka. We've had several seasons of him being a fantastic FPL pick, so the confidence level is very high on him, much higher than it would be on a Gyökeres, who we've only seen a very limited small sample size of up until now in the Premier League. Like I said, I wouldn't be fire selling Gyökeres. He'll still score goals. It's a good run of fixtures. He might get a penalty at some point. I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. And the data's still all right. So I think he'll tick along just fine. I wouldn't be panicking. But if I was buying right now, Saka, with the benefit of penalties by the looks of it, with the fact that his open play attacking threat is really good, the minutes look better, and he's taking set pieces, which Arsenal are very, very good from, I think he's slightly the better pick. But I don't think it's worth trading from one to the other if you're not on wildcard. I'll also talk about Eze and to a lesser extent Declan Rice. Both are also very good picks. I would try and prioritise Saka or Gyökeres over Eze because I think the routes to points are better, the attacking upside is better. But now that Ødegaard has gone down with another injury, and if reports are to be believed, he might be out for a little while, 6 to 8 weeks apparently, but again, unconfirmed at time of recording. If that is correct though, I think Eze's minutes do get bumped, and he is a pretty good FPL option at 7.5 million. Obviously, at Crystal Palace, he was a brilliant FPL option, and he's in a better attacking team right now. He has lost some of the different routes to points that he had at Palace. He's not quite as talismanic, but I still think 7.5 in this Arsenal attack, if he's getting 80 to 90 every single week, that's still decent value. So I wouldn't be putting him to one side. If you haven't got the money for Gyökeres or Saka, I think Eze is also a good pick. Then finally, I wouldn't discount Declan Rice either. Now, he is yellow flagged in FPL right now, but I would kind of ignore that given that we saw him play for England. It will be a matter of time before that gets removed. He gets very good minutes for Arsenal. The underlying attacking data, admittedly, isn't great, but he does have the benefit of corners from one side, a bit like Saka. We've already talked about them being very profitable from corners, so he will get the odd attacking return from those. And then also, we know he's got free kicks in his locker. He scored 2 incredible ones last season, of course. And if Zubimendi keeps playing as well as he is, I don't think Declan Rice is ever really going to play in that DM role ever again for Arsenal. It's going to be in that left 8 role where he does make box crashing runs, where he does get involved in final phase attacking plays. I do think that he's actually a pretty good value pick at 6.5 million, and I wouldn't overlook him just because his attacking threat by itself isn't as good as these other 3. He is cheaper, he's got set pieces, he's very good from free kicks, the minutes are pretty solid, and he gets DEFCON every now and then as well. So again, a bit of a budget one, and I would try and prioritise the more attacking options here, Saka and Gyökeres maybe. But if you don't have the money, and the situation is unique to you that you can only really get to an Eze or a Rice, I would not discount either of them either. Both good picks in my books. Okay, so another player that I'm getting quite a lot of questions about at the moment is Alexander Isak, and whether or not it might be time to start considering him once again as a serious FPL option. He is owned by over 10% of the game, so some managers have already gone there. He's obviously got a great track record. Liverpool are a very well-supported club worldwide, so that, in part, is why the ownership isn't anywhere near zero. I think if it wasn't for those factors, his ownership would be a lot closer to zero. I don't think he's differential enough for the output and what I would have expected from him up until this point. But at some stage, he's going to become a very good FPL pick. We know he's a high-quality striker, one of the best strikers in the league, probably second to only Haaland, realistically, based on what we've seen over the last couple of seasons. So I have no doubt that he will come good in the Liverpool shirt and he will start banging in goals for fun at some point. But he is still building up fitness a little bit, and I'm still not completely confident that now is the right time to go there. Man United next up is a good game for Liverpool. I expect them to score a couple of goals in that. I do also expect Isak to start. I don't see why they wouldn't start their strongest 11. But Ekitike hasn't exactly been playing poorly this season. He's gotten quite a few goals. It would be harsh to just kind of use him as a bench striker from now on. So I'm still not fully confident, whilst Isak's building up that fitness still, that Ekitike won't steal minutes off of him. And even if Isak does start, I'd still be very worried that Ekitike comes off the bench at around 60 to 70 minutes. If things aren't quite going the way that Slot would want them to, Isak might get brought off still. And the other key aspect with Isak that is putting me off slightly until he starts seeing 90 minutes every single week is he doesn't have penalties this season, and Salah is going to continue to take them. And that is one thing that he did have in his locker at Newcastle at a cheaper price last year that made him a better FPL pick. He's more expensive now, the minutes aren't as secure, and he doesn't have penalties. He is in a better attack, so I expect his XG outside of penalties, that non-penalty XG, will still be very, very good. But he does have other elite strikers and wide forwards around him that are going to take goal share off of him. So I'm just not completely convinced that he's going to be good value for money at 10.6 million when there are a lot of other picks out there that I think we are much more confident on the minutes on. We've got penalties with a lot of them at the moment as well and come in cheaper. At some point, maybe even after game week 11, by that point, he will have built up fitness and Liverpool have a great run of fixtures from game week 12 onwards. By that point, we might have seen enough to say, you know what, even without penalties, he's getting the minutes, he's got the data, it's worth the money, maybe even ahead of Mo Salah at 4 million more expensive. But until that moment, I just don't think it's worth jumping on a player that we're just not completely sold on in terms of those expected minutes when you combine it with the other factors. So for me, I wouldn't be buying him just yet. if you do buy him, I don't think he's a terrible pick. And I think he will get goals in the next 4 game weeks, by the way, as well. He'll also get minutes. It's not like he won't play and he won't get goals. But I don't know if he'll get enough to make him good value for money for over 10 million. You expect quite a lot for that kind of price. And I don't think we're quite there yet on Isak. By the time we get to game week 12 and Man City's out of the way, ask me again, and I think my answer might have changed, because I think we'll have a lot more confidence on the minutes and we'll start to see Liverpool tick a little bit more, which at the moment we're not seeing just yet. But I don't think that's a million miles away. And by the time we get to game week 12 onwards, when they've got a great run of fixtures, I think he could be right on the menu for a lot of managers. So let's have a quick word on West Ham options. I've picked out both Bowen and Paqueta. There are defensive options that also look pretty reasonable as well. Mavropanos might start getting DEFCON more often, picked up 20 DEFCON points in the most recent match. Juve as well is picking up assists. You've also got Kilman, who doesn't look too bad on DEFCONs either. But for now, I want to focus on the attacking options, Bowen and Paqueta, with what is a pretty good run coming. I don't think it's quite as good as what some people are suggesting, especially when you take into account the team quality. West Ham are not a top 4, top 6 side. Obviously, no offence intended, but I think that's realistic to say. Bowen and Paqueta, though, are reasonable options for the next stretch of fixtures. 2 promoted clubs in there against Leeds and Burnley. Brentford at home as well, not a bad fixture. Newcastle isn't great. And then after Burnley, I don't think it's an amazing run, but it's also good enough that you don't need to fire sell the likes of Bowen or Paqueta. Now, Paqueta, the strength is that he's cheap enough to not necessarily have to play every single week, and he's got penalties as well. He's also been very nailed in to the West Ham 11 so far. So I'm on a wild card, which I've talked about in a few videos this week already, and he is in my thinking as that sort of 4th or 5th cheap midfielder that does have different routes to points. He's also been picking up DEFCON every now and then as well. So he does have routes and he's got penalties, which is obviously very helpful. A good run coming with 3 home games in there, 2 promoted clubs in the next 4. I think he's a reasonable buy. I don't think he's a sensational one and I don't want to get carried away with it. But if you're looking for that cheaper midfielder, I think he's in the conversation with a good run coming. Bowen, on the other hand, so far this season has massively overperformed on the underlying attacking data. 0.19 XGI per 90 is honestly pretty awful for someone that expensive. 7.7 million. He has taken 3 price drops already this season. So a lot of managers who had him early on lost faith, but he has been returning pretty well. He's picked up 3 goals in the league already. After 7 game weeks, that's not a bad rate of return. And the projections for the next 5 game weeks also suggest he should tick along at about that rate. 0.45 would be about 3 in 7. So if he does that over the next few game weeks, I think he's reasonable value for money at 7.7. The other thing benefiting Bowen is he's also got very good underlying baseline BPS, which basically means if he returns, he's also quite likely to get some sort of bonus points attached to that return. So a bit like, if you remember, Cunha last season was very high on the baseline BPS, and therefore every time he got even an assist, he also got some bonus points attached to it as well. So if Bowen gets a goal or an assist, those goals are probably worth a little bit more, maybe 5 or 6 points, and the assist might be worth 4 or 5 points as well. So that helps him. And again, like with Paqueta, a good run of fixtures. All I would say is that there isn't great value in the forward line this season. So it really comes down to how much you want to spend across your front 3. If you don't like João Pedro and you wanted a front 2 of maybe Haaland alongside someone around 8 million, I think Bowen is a reasonable alternative to João Pedro and he will tick along nicely. He doesn't have penalties though. The underlying data isn't great so far. And if I was picking him as a 3rd striker, I'm not sure it's great value for money. I'm not sure spending 14.5 million on Haaland, then 7.5 to 7.7 on João Pedro, depending when you bought him, or Gyökeres at 9 million as well, and then Bowen at 7.7 million. It's quite a lot to be spending in a forward line where I think so far this season, the forwards just haven't really been great value for money generally. 2 of those forwards I listed might not be on penalties. Bowen certainly isn't, whilst Paqueta's on the pitch. And there is a lot better value in the midfield right now as well. So the only hesitation I would have on Bowen is whether or not it's good value for money and whether or not structurally it makes sense. But if you're having him as a 2nd striker alongside Haaland and you're not that bothered by João Pedro or Gyökeres, I think it makes a bit more sense, and then you can spend more money in the midfield and in defence where you are getting multiple routes to points. You've got DEFCON. They're better on the bonus points as well, generally, and quite a lot of the midfielders have the advantage of penalties now as well. So I think with Bowen, he's a good pick. I like him, and I am considering him on a wild card, but I don't know if I'd have him as a third forward. It would mainly be a decision between him and João Pedro and Gyökeres for that second forward spot for me personally. So I'm going to wrap up the video talking about Tijjani Reinders, who has been a very popular pickup. He's 33% owned, so almost exactly a third of the FPL player base own him. But I think some people are starting to have some nagging doubts about him as an FPL option. I think balance is required because he's still under 6 million. So really, what do you expect from someone that cheap? The attacking data is not great. 0.15 XG per 90, 0.07 XA. So it's not like he's going to be getting attacking returns every single game. But at that price, you don't really expect or need him to be getting that. Maybe an attacking return in every 3 or every 4 game weeks is about fair for a player at this price. And Man City are a very good attack. So as long as he's nailed into that starting 11 and he's getting 90 week on week, he will tick over with a decent amount of attacking returns. He's been a bit unfortunate, in fact, in the last couple of game weeks, not to get more than he has done. So we could easily be sat here with Reinders after 7 game weeks, a new signing to the Premier League, on 4 or 5 attacking returns. And I don't think anyone would have been shocked about that, given the chances that he's picked up in the last few game weeks. But he's got 3 attacking returns, so that's almost a return every other game week at 5.8 million. I think that is absolutely fine. So I don't think he's a player that needs to be mass sold at the moment ahead of what is a pretty average run of fixtures. It's not great. And if you're on a wild card like myself, I think it's a much more difficult decision as to whether or not to include him. I currently don't have him on my wildcard draft. It's not because I don't think he's a good player and he won't tick along. It's just if I've got unlimited transfers and this set of fixtures ahead of me, I do wonder if there are other players that I can maybe get a little bit more out of, or maybe just not have a 5.5 to 6 million option in my midfield, which currently I don't. So the structure is also maybe dictating that I don't have him either. But it's not because I don't think he's going to tick along, because I think he will. The only other thing with Reinders that I will wrap up by saying is his minutes have been very secure up until this point, but I think that is partly down to 2 factors. Number one is because they've had injuries. So Foden only really crept back into the starting 11 fairly recently. Marmoush has been out. Ait Nouri on the left-hand side has been out as well, although that probably doesn't affect Reinders too much. You've also had Cherki, more importantly, that has been out for a little while. And I think when all of those players are back, Rodri as well comes into contention a little bit, I suppose. When all of those players are back, I do wonder if Reinders is going to be quite as nailed. I still think he'll start the majority of games. I wouldn't panic about it. But especially with Cherki in particular, they do take up similar-ish positions on the field. And I wonder if they'll try and save him for some important Champions League matches at some point, or just give him a bit of a rest every now and then. Still, at 5.8 million, I think he's absolutely fine to hold on to. Unless I was on a wildcard, I would probably hold on to him for Everton at the very least, and then start making decisions from that point onwards. But I think he's just one of those players that as long as he's in that Man City starting 11, he's absolutely fine to hold on to. So like I said, on a wild card, tougher decision to make. But with transfers, I just wouldn't be getting rid of him, honestly. I think he's absolutely fine to hold on to if you have to. So as we reach the end of today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and hit subscribe to the channel, especially if you're new around here and you did enjoy yourself. And I'll see you next time with, I think, an updated wildcard draft ahead of Game Week 8.